Said it was going to be color night, and you did not commit, and I'm very disappointed. Jackson, I'm on board with that. So I've got a gift card I'm going to give away in just a minute. I'm going to let you vote who's the best authentic color here. What? Do we need to vote? We may. We'll see. Blue and blue. I mean, it's a little bit. I'll give you a little bit. Some of you are like, I just wore like a really bright color, and that's what I'm going to go with is my answer. But that's okay. So, a couple announcements. If you're interested in our Belize mission trip, that means you are graduated. You've at least completed by this upcoming summer, 9th grade. You are eligible and you're interested and want more information. Make sure you see me afterwards. We had an interest meeting this past week, and so I'm giving out information. It is coming up. We're going to Belize next summer, but deposits and applications are due by the end of October. So make sure you sign up, or let me know that you're interested in sign up by that time. D-Serve, we are at like 85% capacity, maybe 90%. I'm not good with math sometimes. So we're almost full. If you're interested, you should sign up sooner rather than later. Disciple Serve is October 8th and 9th. We're going to have a great weekend where we're here doing some Bible studies and doing some service projects to help other people that is not us on that as well. And if you're in high school, we are about to complete our first course of the Student Leadership University, and it's our Bible study discipleship leadership time that we do on Tuesday nights from 7 to 8:15. It costs $15. It's a 6-week commitment on your behalf, and I feed you lots and lots of food. Correct, Jonah? Jonah's good. It's good food. It's very good food. Maggie, is it very good food? Maggie's just like shaking her head like yes. She's like, I'm not going to talk. Which is really bad because I'm about to call Maggie up here because she had to share something too. So Maggie, come up here. Maggie has something to say. I'm walking off stage because Maggie just wanted to invite you to do something that has nothing to do with me, but I'm letting her share.
That's a lot more people than that. Maggie's mom. Yeah. All right. So I'm pretty sure it's this Sunday. Yeah. High schoolers are allowed. It's from 5 to 8 p.m. at my house. Basically, we're going to do like a high school fellowship thing. We're going to do some games and stuff. Why are y'all staring at me? Okay. If you have any questions, you can ask me after his sermon, and you should bring a snack. And I think that's all. But
a good one.
Yeah. If you want to be my favorite, bring the house with you.
And airdropping. We're going to airdrop.
But I'd love for you all to come. So. Miss Christina,
I've had us disconnected like 5 times tonight, so we will see if it stays up for the rest of the night. All right. So if you think you were dressed in all color, that you would have a chance of winning a gift card. Raise your hand. Jackson, Trace.
No, Trace doesn't stand a chance.
listen,
He's all blue.
No, he's not.
Jackson, come up here. Trace, come up here. You have blue eyes? Micah. I feel like I should invite a girl up here just because. It's not the same blue, it's close. Cameron's like, no, I'm not up there. Cameron's dressed like all pinkish color. I have purple.
I'm so cold.
Look, let's take it. Wait. Show of hands. How many people say black is a color?
Black is actually a
Okay, scientific fact, no, black's the color. You're wrong. Sorry, wrong. It's the absence of color. No. All right, Lydia. I'll let Lydia. All right. Lydia's so excited. No. All right. I feel like I should get a chance to win a gift card too. I'm wearing a Stetson shirt. Georgia hats. I'm sorry. Whose team is number 1 right now? Who's going to lose to Tennessee this weekend? All right, we're going to move on then. All right. Georgia's playing Kent State. If we lose, yeah, that's not going to happen. All right, all right. I'll show of hands. I'll take myself out. Show of hands by cheers and applause. Who should win the gift card? We got Mike over here. Cheers and applause. Jackson. Grace. Lydia. Lydia wants you to know her eyes are blue too, okay? That is very important. She changed the color of her eyes. She changed the color. You dressed up to match the color of your eyes. Your eyes, so you changed the color of your eyes. That's what you did. That's what I said. It's like a vampire. That's what she. Okay, so Lydia, Grace, Jackson. This is not Mardi Gras. We're not throwing out beads. Keep your beads on, sir. All right. There was someone standing for it. All right, and our winner is Jackson. I mean, he did. Look, I will say, I put on red shoes, red pants, red shirts, red hats. You know what color my boxers are? We're not going to go there. All right, here we go. 3 gift cards. You do your choice. Which one do you want? There's a Panda Express for a value undetermined. There is a Tijuana Flats for a value undetermined. Tijuana Flats.
It's Mexican Mexican. It's Mexican Mexican.
It's like Lowe's. And Starbucks. Which one would you like? Panda Express, Tijuana Flats, and Starbucks. Starbucks. All right. So I've got 2 other gift cards that we may or may not give away tonight. We'll see. All right. It depends on how y'all behave during the lesson and pay attention during the game. So, all right, I'm going to pray for us, and then our worship team is going to come and lead us in worship. So bow your heads with me, and let's pray together. Rayo, I'm praying for you right now. Dear Jesus, thank you for loving us. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to just gather and to have fun. Lord, I pray that you would help us as we worship you, to put our focus on you, to give you the glory from our time tonight, Lord. And as we open your word, help us to become more like you and to see who you are because of it, Father. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen. Y'all can stand up.
How about now? It wasn't that funny. Oh. We'll just stand up here and smile. Come all ye weary, come all ye thirsty, come to the well that never runs dry. Drink of the water, come and thirst no more. Come all you sinners, come find his mercy, come to the table, he will satisfy. Taste of his goodness, find what you're looking for. nations. Come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting there with open arms. He's open arms. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well. I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved the world. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him for the wonders of His love. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him for the wonders of His love. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well. I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved the world. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions. Come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting, God so loved the world. Amen. Thanks for singing, guys. Silence. Crickets. You guys having a good time? Yeah? Okay. Good and good. In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory, to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Amen. Sing this with us. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering, you saw to the other side. Knowing this was our salvation, Jesus, for our sake you died. Oh, sing praise. Praise the Father, praise the Son, and praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, amen. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth alone shall not heal, shall not fade. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Oh, love is His grace. Praise the Father, praise the Son, oh, praise the Spirit, three in one. Father, glory, I trust Thee, whom in praise forever to the King of Kings. Forever to the King of Kings. You guys can have a seat.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and say this because I know who exactly is going to say it. And it happens every time, somewhat seems like. Everything I'm about to tell you is true at this point. So Rayo's going to ask me in a second, is that really true? Yes, it's true. Okay. So just go ahead and save that for you as well. Did I ask you? Did I ask you if you have a question? No, exactly. All right. So here we go. No. All right. So here we're going to get started. So we're going through our series now, Downhill. We're looking at the stories told by Matthew of who Jesus was. In Matthews 5, 6, and 7, just as a reminder, Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, greatest sermon ever. He gives it. He's coming now down in Matthew chapter 8. He's coming down the mountain. So he's on this downhill experience. If you've ever had like a really spiritual high, or you've been somewhere and you've really had a really great time and you've been with lots of friends and family, you come back from summer camp or something like that, it feels like you're coming down a hill. However, that's where most of us live our lives, is downhill, not up on mountaintops. It's not good to live on mountaintops. It's not always safe. So God has given us a chance to live downhill. Jesus shows us in his example here what downhill looks like. And so this is him coming down the hill. But in each of these stories in Matthew chapter 8, what we see is Jesus actually has authority over different segments. And so in the first week, we saw that Jesus has authority over the devout and religious leaders. Jesus has authority over, last week we looked at the disciples. Jesus has authority over death and disease. So we're looking at Jesus' authority. Like he is demonstrating it for us. So in our story today, we see that Jesus has authority as well, because he has authority over a storm. If you've grown up in church, you've probably heard this story a lot. And I think sometimes we read the story and think, well, it's a nice story, it doesn't happen. But how does it really make and understand for me? So I want to help you understand this story matters to us because we all face storms at some point, correct? Like if you think about your life, like you've heard the saying before, hopefully you've heard it before, you're either going through a storm right now, or you just come out of a storm, or you're probably about to go in a storm. Like usually something's going to go wrong. That's how life happens. It happens in cycles. So if you haven't gone through a storm, you probably have just gone, if you're not going through a storm right now, you probably just got done with a really rough time, or you're about to go into a really rough time. And so Jesus, in this story, he steps into the storm. And that's what I want you to see. Like, Jesus comes in the storm, and he doesn't shy away from it. So when I say storms, what do you think of some things of in your life that come to your mind as storms? Random.
Oh, yeah, my baseball games have been getting canceled a lot of times. Now it makes me really sad.
Baseball games getting canceled, okay?
Because, like, they've been canceled like 5 times already.
I mean, it's a rough life. I understand that. Some storms are rougher than others. Eli? Sin problems. We face sin. We face the consequences of our sin.
It's raining.
The rain. I mean, that's a literal, actual storm, sure. Okay, so I've shared this before, and if you've been in here, you've heard me share this, and I share this again because it's that time of year when, for me, this was a personal storm that we walked through as a family. So 9 years ago to this week or next week, however you want to define it, was when Zach was diagnosed with cancer. And so Zach, as a 7-month-old baby, the doctor had looked at him and said some things and said his eye was kind of wandering and nothing big to worry about. So go get it checked out. Went to the eye doctor. He got it checked out. The eye doctor said, come back in a month. And so 9 years ago this week, we went back to the eye doctor and had him check out. And the eye doctor, as he was examining Zach, as much as you can examine a 7-month-old baby, he was examining him and said, we're going to send you to a hospital. Is your choice Vanderbilt? We were living in Chattanooga at the time. Is your choice Vanderbilt Children's Hospital or St. Jude Hospital in Memphis? We think we know what it is, but we can't say. Because if we say, then we diagnosed it and you can't go to either of the hospitals. And so we think it's probably cancer. And so we're sitting in this eye doctor's office, and we have a choice to make of what hospital we're supposed to go to. We have no idea what choice to make. And so the question we asked the doctor was, which one's better? His response was, Vanderbilt's closer, St. Jude is better. As parents, it was a very easy choice for us. We chose St. Jude. And so the way they made it sound to us that day in that moment was, hey, St. Jude is going to call you, and they're going to work out transportation, and they're going to get him there tonight. If you're ever in the doctor's office and they tell you you need to go to the hospital right now, today, that's not a good sign. And so we went home, we packed our stuff, and we talked to St. Jude, and we left that day, a 6-hour drive, to go to St. Jude that day. We got to St. Jude that night and went through the hospital and got him checked in and started running tests, like doing blood work and all those things. We went from that being Monday to doing lots of tests on Tuesday. Wednesday, they diagnosed him officially with having cancer of the eye, retinoblastoma. Diagnosed with cancer. Thursday, they gave it to us and gave us a choice. Said, all right, you can have Zach go through chemo and do treatments, and we can try to save his eye. However, the tumor looks really large, and if we wait too long, there's a chance that the tumor spreads and breaks off and gets to other places. Now, if you don't know your anatomy very well, the eye is connected most closely to what? The brain. Brain tumors are not a good thing either, all right? Eye cancer is bad. Brain tumors are worse. And so we had to sit with the doctor and make a choice on that week. And again, I say storms. This was a storm for us. We had to sit there and make a choice. Do we try to fight this and save Zach's eye, or do we have them remove his eye? And so because the doctor said, look, if you wait too long, the cancer could spread. The tumor is large enough, Zach probably doesn't have any sight and probably will never have any sight in that eye. And so we had to make a choice in that moment, at that moment, and we not knowing what to do. We asked, if it was your son, what would you do? And he said, I'd have him remove his eye. And so on Friday, Zach had surgery to remove his eye, enucleation. On Saturday, St. Jude is 6 hours away from where we lived in Chattanooga, in Memphis. 6 hours? 5 hours? 5 hours, 6 hours? 6. 6 hours when you're driving a little kid who needs stops and stuff like that. 6 hour drive. On Saturday, he had his eye removed on Friday. On Saturday, they sent us home, back to Chattanooga, and said, we'll see you in 2 weeks. For the record, St. Jude's a really great hospital. We never actually spent the night in the hospital. They have like a hotel there, basically, that's right next to it. So he had his eye removed on Friday and sent us home a couple hours later. Sent us back to the hotel later that day. They checked him on Saturday and then sent us home. That's a really bad time, right? We got home. The one thing they told us to make sure that Zach doesn't do, don't let him throw up. Because that's going to put strain on his eye and the stitches and stuff like that. And that's not good. So we get back on Saturday. On Tuesday, maybe Wednesday the next week, our bodies were a little stressed out. We didn't have like a lot of immunity system going on here because we hadn't slept very much. I had a lot going on. On like Tuesday or Wednesday next week, we caught a stomach bug. They went through our house. It was one of the worst stomach bugs I think I ever had. First Zach. So we took Zach to the emergency room in Chattanooga. It's like, he is not supposed to be throwing up. Whatever you do, give him stuff to help him not throw up. And they have medicine for that. And so we gave it to him, took him home, and then Natalie and I caught it. Now, I caught it a lot worse because I was really bad off. She probably caught it worse. I couldn't handle it as well. I literally called my mom, who was 3.5 hours away, and she thought I was like dying or something. But I was like, I need you to come up here and take care of us. Like, the three of us are down. Somebody's got to take care of Zach. Me and Natalie will be fine, but somebody's got to come take care of this baby who can't even feed himself and just had surgery on his eye. And so that was a really rough time. That was a really lot going on in our life.
Is that really true?
It's really true, yes.
Oh, I wouldn't even tell us. Thanks.
I literally said it's all true.
Lose your brain.
And I can tell you a whole bunch of other things that happened during our week, but I tell you that like storms happen. Bad things happen in your life. The things that happen in our life though don't determine who God is. Because in the story today, God stops the storm, but even if he doesn't stop the storm, he's still God. And so our story, Zach's 9.5 now, 9 and 7 months, I guess, technically. Zach is 9 years cancer-free. All right? Because when he had his eye removed, they removed the cancer. Zach never had to go through a round of chemo. Zach has never spent the night in a hospital. Like, that's not just uncommon for like a cancer patient. That's uncommon for most 9-year-olds. All right? Not that they ever had to spend the night in a hospital. Like, that's not normal. The chances of Zach getting a secondary cancer are there, but they probably would have been greater had he undergone chemo, because chemo is actually like putting poison in your body. It's not a good thing. And so we made a hard choice, but it looks like, and thankfully it seems like right now at this point it's been a good choice, but what if it had not worked out? God's still God, right? Even if the storms aren't stopped, he's still in control. And so in the story today, the disciples have heard Jesus. He's shown his authority, but we see that now he gets a chance to stop the storm. And he does in this story, but there are times where he doesn't. And so in our story today, Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27, you can see it here on the screens, that says, "And when he got out of the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep." Talking about Jesus. "And they went and they woke him, saying, 'Save us, Lord, we are perishing.' And he said to them, 'Why are you afraid, O you of little faith?' Then he rose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, 'What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?'" So storms happen. One is a really great example for us that we can say is a great example. You see the disciples were willing to follow Jesus. They got in the boat. Like, that's the first step if we're going to do anything. Like, getting in the boat matters. Like, if you had not been in the boat, you would have been in really big trouble. But they were willing to follow Jesus. They stepped in the boat. That's where they went. And so when we think about storms, what are some things you would say to help define storms? Like, what are things that when we think of storms, what are they? Raymond.
Technically, a storm is basically the thing that
Causes destruction? Well, so that's close. So I came up with 3 things I thought when I came to storms. The first thing that a storm does, really, is storms make us uncomfortable. Like, storms cause discomfort in our lives. So literally, when storms happen, so hurricanes come through, we lose power.
There's a hurricane in Puerto Rico.
Yes, it's gone past. It's
But
gone to the Dominican Republic. It's headed towards Bermuda.
Puerto Rico, they have to deal with that.
They do. And guess what? When hurricanes come through, we've been lucky. We haven't had a hurricane here in 2 or 3 years now, but we've had some, if you've lived in Florida long enough, you've experienced a hurricane, and usually what happens after a hurricane, what happens? The power goes out, right? And when the power goes out, what happens? You don't have air conditioning. You don't have necessarily running water. You lose some things that are comforts for us, things that we find to be comfortable, and so we lose comforts when those things happen. Maybe it's not a hurricane. Maybe it's just a flash thunderstorm that happens, and you're at the grocery store, and so you've got to walk back out to the car while it's pouring down rain, and you step in a puddle, and now your shoe is soaking wet. That is very uncomfortable. Like storms cause things to be uncomfortable for us. That happens. So maybe that's actual physical storms. Maybe a storm for you, in like a real sense, is still something where you have a bad relationship with a teacher. Where there's a teacher that you don't like, or heaven forbid, a teacher that doesn't like you. Or maybe it's a rough relationship with a friend, a rough relationship with a parent. Like there's a relationship that's gone bad where things are uncomfortable, but it's there. That's a storm because things are uncomfortable. So one characteristic of a storm is it makes things uncomfortable. A second characteristic is that a storm is something that can hurt us. Doesn't always, but it can. A storm is something that can cause hurt and cause damage in your life. So most people have been caught in storms before, right? Like it's not uncommon. One of the worst ones I was ever caught in was I was backpacking in New Mexico, and we were out middle of nowhere, nothing around, and we got stuck in a lightning storm. New Mexico is only second in the United States in states to lightning strikes per square area per minute or something like that. So if you think lightning's a lot in Florida, it also does in New Mexico. It's second there. And so we were stuck in this lightning storm, and I was sitting in a cabin on the front porch. We were gathered there because there wasn't anywhere else to go. And so we were on the porch, and between me and closer than that wall over there, the half wall is up, there was a tree that got struck by lightning. And the sound, and the fact the tree, literally, I watched the tree split in half. Storms cause damage. It could have hurt me. I would have hated to have been that tree. That would not have been good. But storms can cause damage. I don't want to die right away anyway. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't. There's no good way of getting struck by lightning. So storms are things that cause destruction. They can cause destruction. They don't necessarily always. When a loved one gets sick, when cancer happens, those are things that really happen in our lives that can cause damage, that can hurt and do hurt. And so we have to be aware that bad things do happen. So storms can cause us to be uncomfortable. Storms can cause destruction. Don't always, but they can cause destruction. Storms also make us feel separated, I think. Storms separate us from those around us. So actual physical storms a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, like I think last month, the tornado that came through DeLand. It started on the other side of the church here and went all the way to George Marks. It left a path of destruction. One of the things that tornado did in the course of its short time that it went across over here was that the cell phone towers were completely cut off because some of the cell phone towers were destroyed. Then the other ones were overloaded. And so communication people were left unconnected. You talked about your family that's in Puerto Rico that was facing the Hurricane Fiona that just went through that. It also went through the Dominican Republic. We did a mission trip to the Dominican Republic 4 years ago, and there are people there that I know that I was worried about, concerned about, that wondering what happened to them because there's no way for us to be connected. Facebook has a great feature on it that says you can mark safe when a natural disaster type thing comes through. So I've seen people who mark as safe or feel like it's good. Connection helps us, but there is a disconnect that comes from storms. So storms are things that make us uncomfortable. Storms are things that, if they don't hurt us, can hurt us. And there are things that separate us. You said sin sometimes feels like a storm. I think sin masquerades as storms because sin doesn't look uncomfortable because it looks appealing or it wouldn't do it. Sin looks appealing, but it makes life uncomfortable, really. Sin does not present itself in a way that it will destroy us. Because if you knew something was destroying you, you'd be like, I'm not doing that. Sin presents itself in a way that, it's good for you, but sin ultimately destroys us. Sin makes us uncomfortable. Sin has the power to destroy us, and it does. Sin makes us think we're fitting. When we sin, we think we're fitting in, but what sin really does is separate us from God. So sin has those characteristics. Sin doesn't look like it, but sin does translate to those storms. The sin has the same effect that storms can have. But storms don't necessarily come because we sin. There are also things that just have the same theory and principle. And so when I think about this story, what I don't want us to do is walk out of here thinking, man, life stinks. Life is horrible because storms happen, right? Like there are going to be storms. You are not going to get out of this life without storms. You are not going to get out of life without bad things happening to you. And if you become a Christian, if you give your life to Jesus, if you do everything right in life, you are still going to face storms. You are still going to face things that happen to us. And so I don't want us to walk out here thinking, man, let's focus on the storms that are going on. Because when we focus on the storms, we kind of end up like the disciples. When we focus on the storms, we miss the point of what's going on. The disciples were concerned with the storms in their life. They weren't concerned with the fact that they had this person they'd been following and listening to and hearing teach and all the things he had said about himself. All those things, they weren't concerned about that. They were just focusing on the storm. Ultimately, they were also focusing on themselves. If it comes to making a choice in your life between saving yourself or saving the Son of God, I would hope you would recognize the fact that you have the chance to save the Son of God. Like there is a reality there that you can do. Like they were not concerned for Jesus, they were concerned for themselves. The disciples were focused on themselves, they were focused on storms. We missed the point. Don't miss the point of what Jesus is saying here, because Jesus does something that's very important to us. He gives us a picture of who he is. Psalm 89 verse 9 says, you rule the raging of the sea, when its waves rise, you still them. Who is that talking about? Anybody know? You rule the raging sea, when its waves rises, you still them. Trace. Talking about God. Like it is referring to God. There's another verse in Psalm 107. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea he hushed. Talking about God.
Jesus didn't exist.
Jesus did exist.
He did, but like he wasn't on earth, so that they didn't know.
They did not recognize him as in his form, correct. But those verses very clearly are talking about God. So when this person, starts doing the things that only God can do, people are like, hold up, wait, what? There was a realization like, all right, he's just given the Sermon on the Mount. He's just given this really great lesson. He started doing miracles. He's shown his authority over death. He's shown his authority over disease. He's shown his authority over the devout. He's shown his authority over the disciples. He's shown where his authority lies. Now he is speaking where the wind and the waves listen and obey. And they ask the question, who is this man? I like the way that Mark tells the story. In Matthew, we see that the disciples were amazed. They marveled. What Mark says is, and when they were filled with great fear, they were afraid. Not because the storm had stopped. What does it take for someone who has grown up their entire life to be afraid of a little storm? Like these were the disciples. Some of these disciples were guys who grew up on the water. They were fishermen by trade. They had fished these waters their entire life. They understood like storms happen, but they were terrified of the storm. The Sea of Galilee, and looking at some of the, like it's not that large. It's like 13 miles by 7 miles, 13 miles wide by 7 miles long, and it's encompassed by mountains. So you would think, man, it couldn't get that rough. But the way the wind actually comes off the mountains, it comes on the sea. Like the story as it says, the waves covered the boat. Have you ever been on a boat?
Yeah.
Like, have you been on not like a cruise ship? All right, that'd be a really big wave, but like a sailboat or a speedboat or something on the ocean.
Yes.
Have you ever had waves on those boats that were bigger than the boat itself?
No.
You probably haven't. I was sailing one time when I was in high school. We were going to the Bahamas. We had left out of Miami. We were traveling over the Gulf Stream at night. The wind was coming through. So we had sat down to eat dinner. And we were sitting there just sailing along, and because it was dark at this point, we didn't see the black clouds rolling in. The black clouds rolling in. But apparently a storm had snuck up on us. And we had to sail up. It was a sailboat, and we were sailing across. And all of a sudden, without warning, we're sitting there at this table eating. The wind caught the sail, and literally the sailboat, the wind caught it and tipped it all the way over where the sail, the mast, touched the water. We lost a few forks and bowls at that point because we were sitting there eating and they just went overboard. I don't know that I've ever been quite that scared at that point. I was not raised on the water to be a sailor, and like all those things. Like it was a new experience, but all of a sudden, like there was a great deal of fear. Like it was enough for these lifelong fishermen to be afraid, but they changed their fear. They stopped being afraid of the storm, and they started being afraid of who Jesus was. Why would they fear that? Rand.
Because Jesus, if they didn't know about Jesus' heart, Jesus just like.
They had seen him heal people. They had seen him do miracles. They had seen him do. They are starting to realize that Jesus is not only who he says he is, but he is really actually God in the flesh. And so what they see, and what I want you to see is when Christ rises, our fears are revised. When Christ rises, our fears are revised. And I very intentionally chose the word revised and not removed. Because the disciples' fears were not removed. They didn't walk away not having fear. They had fears now. Instead of being afraid of nature and being afraid of the wind and the waves, they were now afraid, and a healthy and a God-honoring fear to have respect of who Jesus said he was. He changed their fear. He pointed to the fact that he was the holy God who was creator of all things. He began to point that out to them. He doesn't promise to remove the things they're afraid of or their fears. He promises to be with us. That's the promise he's making here. He doesn't say, look, I'm going to stop the storm. He doesn't say, I'm going to get rid of all the bad things in life that happen to you, but I'm going to be with you during them. Like, Jesus was asleep in the boat. He was with them. He wasn't, in this case, he wasn't in this time walking out on the water to them. He wasn't on the shore and just saying, hey, you guys be safe out there. He was in the boat with them. When everything was going wrong, he was there with them. He hadn't left them to be on their own. He was there in the boat with them. And he said, look, I'm not necessarily always going to get rid of the storms, but I'm going to be with you. It reminds me of the story in the book of Daniel with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood before King Nebuchadnezzar. He said, look, you bow down to my God or I'm going to kill you. They said, I don't think so. Their actual words were, O Nebuchadnezzar, you have no need to answer you this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve, the God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. He will deliver us out of your hand, O king. They said, hey, king, our God can save us. Verse 18, chapter 3. But if not, but even if he doesn't, their response is, hey, king, we're not going to bow down to you. Our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, even if you throw us in the furnace, even if he chooses not to save us, he is still God. He is still holy and perfect, and we will not do anything to disrespect him. And their answer was, God can take away the storm, or God can allow us to face the storm, and he's still God, and we're going to still worship him. That was their choice. That was their answer. And Jesus, in this picture, in this story that we look at today, Jesus is showing us that he is God. He has authority over, that Jesus has the same authority that God has. When God spoke in Psalms that he's calmed the storms, he calmed the waves, Jesus is doing that in this story. Jesus is showing us that his authority, the wind and the waves obey him. As we talked about last week, when the wind and waves obey, the question is, do we obey? He is showing his authority. He shows us his authority of who he has, that Jesus has authority over disasters. When things go wrong in our life, Jesus has authority over the disasters. The doubts, the disease, the death of the disciples, and this week, that his authority is over disasters. That when Jesus comes in and speaks, he doesn't necessarily take away our fears, but he is with us. When Zoe, our daughter, goes to sleep at night, we put her down, and it's going to be about 20 and 30 minutes, she's going to come out. And she's going to come out, and she's going to say that she's scared. And my first response is, you're lying, because if you were scared, You wouldn't have sat in your room for the past 30 minutes and talked to your stuffed animals. Now you're thinking, well, just take the stuffed animals out. If I took the stuffed animals out, she's going to talk to the wall. It does not matter, okay? All right, so at least she has some odd type of logic to talk to. But she's going to talk, and she's going to spend 30 minutes talking to her animals or talking to the wall or playing with her toes. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. Like, she's going to do something. That's who she is, and that's how God's created her, and she's great. But she's going to come out and she's going to say she's scared. She's not scared. She's been in her room for 30 minutes playing by herself. The lights haven't changed. Like, there is nothing that's changed in that 30 minutes where she's like, oh, no, I'm afraid. What she's saying, what she's really saying, what she's asking for is, Daddy, Mommy, will you come play with me? Will you come spend time with me? Will you stay in my room with me for a little bit while I go to sleep? She's not really afraid. She's asking for our presence. She wants us to be with her. That's what Jesus does for us. Jesus recognizes we don't have anything to be afraid of. But he is with us during those things. The story goes, when Christ rose from the boat, he was able to revise their fears, to change them. The story doesn't stop at the boat, though. It goes to the cross. When Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and he rose from the grave, he revises our fears that we can no longer be good enough for God, that we can now have a relationship with him. That we can now fear a holy and perfect God because he loves us and gave his life for us. That his sin, that his life on this earth, he conquered sin and death at the cross. He conquered death when he rose from the grave. His rising changes our fears, that we don't have to fear death anymore. That we don't have to fear not being good enough. That he is holy and perfect because of who he is, we can have a relationship with him. He rose so that our fears could be revised. It happens in the boat, but it also happens at the cross. Jesus promised us that he has authority over disasters. The same God who has authority over disasters spends time with us. He stays with us. He wants us to have his presence. You're going to face storms in your life. Bad things are going to happen. There are going to be storms that try to cause harm or hurt in your life, that make you feel separated, that make you feel like you're not good enough. Jesus doesn't take away the storms because you become a Christian. But Jesus wants you to know that he is with you, that he is standing beside you, that he is in the boat with you, that he cares for you and loves you enough that he's not going to desert you. He's not going to leave you on your own. He is there and God with you every step of the way. Are you willing to turn to him and call on his name? The disciples called on him and it changed everything. But we have to call on the one who calls us to call him. Let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for loving us. Thank you for our time tonight. Lord, I pray that you would help us to recognize, Lord, that we're all going to face storms. But Lord, when we face those storms, when bad things happen to us, Lord, help us to realize that you are with us. Lord, help us to find peace in knowing that you are in the boat with us, that you are facing the storms with us. Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom as we do that. Lord, if there is anyone here tonight who doesn't know what it means to have a relationship with you because you are with us, Lord, I pray that you help talk to a friend, talk to those around them, ask an adult. Lord, help them to understand, like everyone in here, that we can experience peace because you are with us. Father, we praise you and thank you for our time and ask that you guide us as we walk out this week, Father. So in your son's name we pray. Amen. Brad is going to come and lead us in a game here.
What about Mr. Barlow?
Oh, you're going to show me a video here first.
Yo! And you got a set? Sure, what's up?